All right, we're back for part 3 of the Mark Sheldon Ask Me Anything. If you didn't get a chance already, make sure you go watch parts 1 and 2, where we talk about Matt McClain, Gavin Lux, and contract extensions, all in parts 1 and 2. Coming up on today's episode of Chatterbox Reds, we break down the conversation around whether or not the Reds should be trading a starting pitcher, maybe as a package for a bat, and could there be an Eugenio Suarez reunion on the horizon for the Reds? We'll break it all down coming up on Chatterbox Reds. Welcome in, everybody. I'm Craig Sandlin, joined by Nick Kirby. Nick, how are we doing this morning?
Doing good, doing good. I enjoyed our conversations this week. Interesting pieces of news from Mark Sheldon from his reporting. So, yeah, I kind of enjoyed breaking that down and excited to finish off this final chapter.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. But before we get into it, Nick, what's going on over at Omaha Steaks?
Yeah, I know, Craig, the last thing I want to do post-holidays is go shopping. Stores are nuts. You know, we already dealt with that enough in December. So you know what? The best thing you can do, what I do is I go stock my freezer and I reset my freezer this busy holiday season with the exceptional taste of Omaha Steaks and the convenience of having high-quality proteins on hand. It comes packaged just beautifully. That's one of my favorite things we haven't talked about a lot, Craig, is that it comes like packaged like really nice and convenient. You pull it out, everything's in these like nice little boxes. I know for me, like I got a million kids at home, you know, freezer space is very limited. So it coming organized, being able to place right in and fit in nicely is a really nice perk of Omaha Steaks, as opposed to like, you know, you go to the store, you get chicken and it's like falling out and it's like nothing stacks on top of it. You know what I'm talking about, Craig.
I know what you're talking about. Got to fit in good with the Uncrustables and with the chicken
Yeah.
nuggets and all of those other things that are in the freezer. Absolutely.
It's very efficient in your freezer. Craig, what have you been enjoying lately, my friend?
Well, I got to be honest with you, Nick. I maybe it's on me, maybe it's not, but you know, obviously, when I hear about Omaha Steaks, the first thing I think about is the steak, and that's a given. That's an obvious thing. But one of the things I found recently that I didn't necessarily know about with Omaha Steaks is that it's not all steaks. They've got these pre-made comfort meals as well that I've been diving into of recent. And those have really been nice, easy meals for me to put together that feel like I've been in the kitchen for hours, when in reality, I've been in the kitchen for like 15 minutes. So they've got everything from lasagna to shepherd's pie to pot roast to chicken and dumplings and everything in between. So if you want a home cooked meal that tastes good and doesn't necessarily take as much time as it would otherwise, Omaha Steaks has you covered there too. It's not just about grilling out and getting your steaks on the grill. There's a lot of other options for you as well.
Well, let Omaha Steaks deliver high-quality proteins right to your door. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide during their end-of-season sale. And for an extra $35 off, use the promo code CHATTERBOX at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code CHATTERBOX. Terms apply. See site for details.
Awesome. Let's jump into it this time. Part 3 of our Mark Sheldon Ask Me Anything dissection. We start with a conversation that we've had throughout this offseason, of course, and that is the Reds and their starting pitching. What should they do? Do they have enough depth to move a piece in a trade? Should they sign some extensions? Well, let's get into it. Mark Sheldon was asked specifically about the Reds trading a starting pitcher as part of a package for a bat, maybe a Luis Robert, maybe somebody else. And here's what Mark Sheldon had to say, quote, "From everything I've heard, the front office is loath to part with any starters to make a trade. They want as much depth as possible, considering that just about every starter other than Brady Singer spent time on the injured list in 2025. Plus 3 pitchers, Lauder, Aguiar, and Williamson, missed the entire season. But to me, it may take a starter to get what they want via trade." So, Nick, let's break it down. We'll start with the fact that they, quote, loathe to part with any starters to make a trade. That is for those less educated people like me who had to Google what loathe meant in this capacity. It means that they're hesitant. They are hesitant to part with any starters to make a trade. They could be hesitant all they want, Nick, but that doesn't mean that that might not be what it takes to get what they want. Your thoughts on Sheldon's response about Reds trading the starting pitcher?
Yeah, I thought the way Sheldon laid it out was perfect. Every starter other than Brady Singer spent time on the injury list in 2025. I mean, that's why you don't just dump Brady Singer. Then from that report from The Athletic, it seems like the Reds are unwilling to move Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo, and Andrew Abbott, so that pretty much leaves Brady Singer, Chase Burns, and I don't think any of us think Chase Burns is a realistic option to move unless you're bringing back Ketel Marte or something crazy. But yeah, I mean I was okay with moving Singer if it was the result of Schwarber, like you use that money. I still didn't like that. I still would have liked to have just spend the $12 million to have your massive starting pitching insurance policy. But yeah, I can certainly stomach that. But if we're talking, it's obviously past, but if you had to trade Brady Singer to be able to sign Ryan O'Hearn, I just don't know if that's a net positive for the Reds. And I know everyone who's saying, I watched this team, they couldn't hit. I don't know. I really don't. I think that the reason the Reds made the playoffs was their pitching. And you're taking away the biggest consistent pitcher from that. Not the best by any stretch, but a guy that took the ball every fifth day. And that's valuable. And I think the question you have to ask is, if you trade Brady Singer and you start getting, obviously, you just replace with Chase Burns and Brett Lauder. Yeah, that rotation is not just going to be foolproof all year. Obviously, A, those two both are on innings limits, and B, the chances of everyone else staying healthy is not going to happen. So, are you really okay with giving the Brady Singer innings to Jose Franco at some point, or Chase Petty? Is that worse than having to give at-bats to CES? What has more upside? I would argue CES has more upside than Franco in a starting pitching role. That's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, well, the conversation I think is really the other piece that's been reported on throughout this last couple of weeks, and that's that if the Reds do decide to move a starting pitcher, which again kind of conflicts with the whole report of not wanting to move one, but if they do move one, that they would want to immediately replace those innings with someone else, and I think that's a sign that they would go out and pick up somebody else off either through a signing or through a trade. And this all goes back to the initial report of Hunter Green and the Cincinnati Reds not being on the same page, and the thought that maybe Hunter Green could be moved this offseason. Obviously, he's on an attractive contract. Hunter Green then went and had a sit down with Bob Nightingale, which Nick and I talked about before the holiday, and spent a lot of time with him, and certainly seems to want to be in Cincinnati. So it kind of leaves you with guys like Andrew Abbott and Brady Singer and Nick Lodolo, who would be potential answers from a trade deadline, all three of which were named as guys that the Reds don't want to move. I struggle though, Nick, because I agree with you. The pitching staff is why the Reds got to the playoffs in 2025, but the offense is why they didn't advance. And I get it. They went up against those vaunted Dodgers, and the pitching staff struggled and gave up the runs, but they were never going to get past the Dodgers with the offense that they had going up against the Dodgers pitching. And I look at there today, and I think it is worse than it was at the end of 2025. And so my struggle is, how do we make that up? And I don't know that I believe that the Reds are going to spend the money on a free agent to bring someone in for a bat. And I just feel like they need a bat. And the most obvious solution is you move one of your starting pitchers. And obviously last episode I talked about how I didn't want to have to lean on guys like Brett Lauder and others to be those guys, Julian Aguilar, Brandon Williamson. But if I have to have a bad start every fifth day in order to get somebody who can hit 30 home runs in Great American Ballpark, then I might be willing to do it.
Maybe. I mean, again, who are we getting? That's kind
100%.
of that's the key. I mean, like if we're talking moving him so we can go sign Harrison Bader, like that's like one of the top. Like that's like kind of what the money. That's Harrison Bader would cost more than Brady Singer, so you would be moving Brady Singer, and then using that savings plus whatever you had left to sign Harrison Bader. That's probably what you're looking at. Eugenio Suarez, we'll talk about in a second. Okay, maybe I could squint and say, yeah, if I can convince him to play be DH. I have still have some concerns with Suarez, but guy had 50 home runs. That might be a realistic gamble, but that's kind of like, I think, in my opinion, the floor of the type of player that I would want if I'm moving off from Brady Singer. It's got to be close to a sure thing. It can't be. And I liked Harrison Bader. Again, I was the guy that said the Reds should have signed Harrison Bader last year. But now he's kind of, to the point where he's probably going to be overpaid, where last year was underpaid. And so it's a tough balance here, but I'm just not trading Brady Singer because I'm annoyed that the offense wasn't good enough. I think that's a poor strategy. It has to be because I found a foolproof, or not, there's no such thing as a foolproof, but I found a something that we feel very confident is going to be a big upgrade to our offense.
I would also say I don't know that Brady Singer would be the pitcher I would move, because I don't know that I get the return for Brady Singer that would make it worth it, right? Because you're talking about who am I going to go out and sign with that money. I'm thinking, who is that trade going to bring in? And I don't know that Brady Singer is going to bring in a name worthy of me being willing to move off of that. However, I do think that there's a world where Nick Lodolo could bring in a more attractive name from a bat perspective that may then translate into a world where I'm more comfortable with that. And so, yeah, Brady Singer frees up more money from a free agency perspective to be able to go out and sign somebody, but Nick Lodolo brings a return. And so that's the conversation I'm more focused on, is what does the return look like for whatever that trade piece is? Not necessarily the money that we're freeing up, because I don't trust the Reds to go out and spend that money anyway. Like, even if they traded Brady Singer and saved $12 million against what their projected salary cap or salary would be this year, like, I just don't know that that really moves the needle for me. You're talking about Harrison Bader versus going out and making a trade centered around Nick Lodolo and some prospects to be able to get a legitimate bat. And so those are the conversations, not necessarily the money piece for me. It's more so about the return piece for me.
Man, Nick Lodolo could maybe potentially an actual big league bat back in return as well. Cool. Or you could get prospects and use those prospects to trade for that big league bat. So, yeah, I'm with you, but it seems like they're reporting that the Reds are not interested in shopping Nick Lodolo. So if that's the case, then that's what you're left. I don't know. It's hard. I think like a possible potential path would be you trade Singer, you sign a guy like Jose Quintana, who's a lot older, but still inning for inning has actually been a little bit better than a Singer. Has had more of the injury risk, but still, he still made 24 starts and then 31 the year before. I think that, and then you use that money for a bat. But again, that's still not. It's still, to me, feels like it has a very possibility of just rearranging deck chairs for the hell of it.
And to be completely honest, feels exactly like what the Reds do. They just rearrange deck chairs. They never really get a whole lot better. So that would probably be status quo for them. What wouldn't be status quo, and I understand there's concerns about it, but what would not be status quo is a reunion with Eugenio Suarez, a guy who last year, as you mentioned, hit 50 home runs. Mark Sheldon was asked about that during his AMA on Reddit. Here's what he had to say. Quote, "I've heard nothing about the Reds talking to Suarez at this point, but that's a bat and a person who would be a difference maker for Cincinnati. The Reds know what Suarez can do on the field and off the field too. He's a guy that they loved having in the clubhouse. The big issue is where he would play. Hayes is locked in for multiple years contractually at third base. I've heard nothing about the Reds talking to Suarez at this point, but that's a bat and a person who would be a difference maker for Cincinnati. So I guess at this point, Nick, let's have the conversation and let's just ask you bluntly, are you interested in a reunion with Eugenio Suarez?
Deep South Commodities is a proud supporter of Chatterbox Reds and our Deep Drive of the Day, and DSC is a leader in renewable commodities for biofuel production, specializing in used cooking oil collection, aggregation, and sales. Visit www.deepsouthcommodities.com for more information. Thanks as always to our friends at DSC. And we also want to remind you that you can call or text 988 anytime, day or night. The 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is a place to get support for anything related to mental health. Whether it's an immediate crisis, simply wanting to find out how to connect with care, or anything in between, it's a 100% confidential, secure, and anonymous way to reach out for help when you don't know where else to turn. To connect, call or text 988 or visit mantherapy.org to get help. It's okay not to be okay.
Are you interested in a reunion with Eugenio Suarez?
Yes, but just again, it would just depend on the years more than anything else. I don't really care how much the Reds have to pay him in 2026 because it's not my money. But he's 34 years old. There's certainly some flaws in his game. I wouldn't want him to play third base. He was -6 outs above average, and he's getting older. I think you would bring him in as a guy that either he transitions to first base or just as a straight DH. And I think that would be the role for him. He obviously had 49 home runs and played in some big ballparks. I mean, that's a legitimate 50 home run potential there. It's probably at least 30 home runs, but he's a volatile player. I mean, he's had some ups and downs. He still has been an above average player for 4 straight years. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the last 9. So there's like a lot bigger a track record. Unfortunately, the worst year was the year before he got traded from the Reds. He had a really low BABIP last year. I mean, 243. He's been a guy who's never had a high BABIP, but the 3 years before were all over 300. So that probably contributed a lot to that sub 300 on base percentage. But in some ways, the Reds do just need a masher. So again, like if it probably for me, Craig, if I'm trying to be realistic about how this would happen, it would have to be Suarez just kind of. It probably would be like a right before spring training type signing. That's my guess if this was to happen, where Suarez just is not getting the offers anywhere else. And says, all right, yeah, I'll come to Cincinnati, maybe a 2-year deal or something like that. I just don't see the Reds at this point competing with the other teams that not only can go more for Suarez, but it makes more sense for them to go more for Suarez.
Well, let's be clear, Nick. I think one of the things that's important here is what does a contract for Suarez look like? And I'm looking at a number of projections. They're all in the 2 to 3 year range. I don't think that's necessarily the answer or the problem. The problem is that he's going to want somewhere between $20 and $25 million a year based on these projections. ESPN has it at 2 years, $45 million total. MLB Trade Rumors has 3 years, $61 million. The Athletic has 3 years, $72 million. Sports Illustrated has 2 years, $43. But Sheldon was asked separately about big names and big bats, and he specifically said at that point that type of offer seems as if it was reserved for Kyle Schwarber due to that unique case. It doesn't seem like the Reds are going to go out and give that kind of a contract to somebody else unless it was a Schwarber type offer. And as much as I love Gino, he's not Kyle Schwarber from that perspective in terms of the local ties and what he would bring. So I don't think it's a realistic option at this point for the Reds to go out and spend that kind of money on him. I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to it, but to your point, you bring him back, you put him up with Chris Valaika. Does he hit 50 home runs again, even in Great American Ballpark?
I think Gino's going to give Chris Feliga the middle finger if he tells him not to hit home runs.
Yeah. So I don't know, but what's your kind of reaction when you hear those kind of projections?
It makes sense that he's all over the place because he's a really hard player to figure out because he has had these like volatile seasons. He's been very up and down. I mean, when you hit 49 home runs and you only have a 125 WRC plus, it's kind of one of those things where you go, what? Like, it's really hard to have a W, and that still by far would be the best on the Reds, don't get me wrong. But when you hit 49 home runs, you're thinking like the 140, 150 range like Schwarber had. So yeah, like that, if you get him another 240, yeah, I think that absolutely makes sense. The Reds could do it. They could trade Singer and Lux, and that's almost that whole salary for 2026. And I think they could find a way to move it around for one more year and not really be that difficult to do. There's definitely the upside of you lose Singer, you lose Lux, you get Suarez. There's certainly an upside of that being a positive, but I don't think you can also downplay the possibility that could be a negative. It would be a risk either way, I think, in my opinion, because Singer and Lux could outperform Suarez in 2026. That might sound crazy to some. I don't really think it is. You know, these guys could be 35 years old. Did have a sub 300 on base percentage last year. If he isn't hitting 40 home runs, like if he's hitting 28 home runs with a sub 300 on base percentage, that's not that great of a player for a guy that provides no defensive value.
Yeah. And to be perfectly clear, he provides zero defensive value to this team. He would be strictly a DH in the same mold that Kyle Schwarber would be strictly a DH. And Gino would have to accept that. And, you know, I don't know if that's necessarily what he's looking for. You mentioned his defensive metrics were not good last year, but I don't know whether or not that's something that he's open to, just knowing what that means for his value long term to just be strictly a DH versus playing defensively, even though he's not a very good defender. But we also saw Kyle Schwarber just signed a 5-year, $30 million a year contract. So definitely a world where he could get a big contract as a DH still.
The on-base percentage difference between Schwarber and Suarez last year was 67 points. 7 additional home runs, and 67 points of on-base. 6-7.
Oh, my God. On that note, Nick, what else is coming up on Chatterbox Sports this week or this weekend or next week?
Well, of course, I have Chatterbox Bearcats this weekend. I don't know who Cincinnati plays, but I'm pretty sure they play this weekend. Be sure to check that out. Of course, Off the Bench, 10 a.m. Monday through Friday, the Stone Shield Show, 11 a.m. Monday through Friday, talking all things Cincinnati sports. Bengals, college basketball really heating up, so be sure to check all of that out.
Big matchup at UCF, currently ranked number 25 in the country on Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern. The guys in Chatterbox.
No way.
UCF is, yeah.
I would never.
Guys that
Miami should have been ranked. I'm sure they lost now that I just jinxed them. Miami should have been ranked. Rank the Red Hawks. Cowards.
They were 30th. 30th.
Cowards.
One vote in the coaches poll, Nick.
Cowards. Yeah, none of the coaches all the coaches that wouldn't schedule them. Cowards.
Make sure you tune in to Chatterbox Bearcats after the game. The guys will give you a complete breakdown of what I'm sure will be a thrilling Bearcats basketball matchup with the Knights down there in Orlando. Look, if you're listening to this on podcast, make sure you drop us a 5-star review, give us a like on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to the channel. Lots of great content all year long with your favorite Cincinnati sports teams right here on Chatterbox Sports. Until next time, for Nick Kirby, I'm Craig Sandlin. We'll see you. Have a great weekend.